Hello and welcome to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel, and on today's episode, I'm very excited to be speaking with my guest, Madge Woollard. Madge has run her own business teaching piano and keyboard since 1994. A graduate of Cambridge University, she teaches children and adults privately and in schools, and is keen to specialize in working with neurodivergent students. Madge was diagnosed autistic in 2016 at the age of 44. Since then, she's taken part in a lot of autism research and is a member of the Spectrum Theatre Company. She lives in Sheffield, UK, with her wife, Jo, who is also late diagnosed autistic. Madge, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Carolyn. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to talk with you today. Like me, you're also late diagnosed autistic. So when did you realize that you are autistic?
Probably about 8 years ago, I started thinking about it. It was actually my wife, Jo, who suggested it. And she works as a counsellor and she is also autistic herself, but she found out later than me. So at the time, she thought that she wasn't autistic and I was. It was really funny that she ended up later getting a diagnosis herself. But she suggested that it would help our relationship if I got it checked out to see if I was or not. And so I went to my GP, and the way it works in the UK is that you can get an assessment on the National Health Service through your doctor. But there is a long waiting list for it, but that's what I did. And so, yeah, that's how it happened.
Oh, wow. So did it surprise you to get a diagnosis of autism?
Well, I started reading about it and I started seeing things that fitted with me. And I believed I had some of the traits. But when I went to the diagnosis for my assessment, I did actually get assessed quite quickly. She said, "Oh, yes, you tick all the boxes." And I'm 100% sure. So I was surprised at how quickly she diagnosed me.
Oh, wow. And that's funny. Okay, so your wife, who didn't know at the time that she was autistic, suggested this for you. So then how, if I may ask, how did that come about that she wound up getting her diagnosis after you got yours?
Well, both of us read a lot after I'd got mine. Stuff about female autism is becoming a lot more in the news, and there's a lot more being written and researched about it now. And so it's easier to spot the signs, I think.
Yeah, I guess my own preconceptions about autism, the symptoms as you see them in little boys. So when I started also reading about autism in girls and women, I'm like, oh, I recognize a lot of this. And I never thought that this was actually what autism, how it presented. So yeah, totally relate to that. Oh, that's so interesting. Now that you know that you are or have always been autistic, what was it like growing up as an undiagnosed autistic child? Like, what was school like? What was life like?
I was a pretty happy child, I think, at least up to the age of 12. I loved school. I was very happy at my primary school. I was a very odd child, I think, from an early age. I didn't play with other children. I preferred to be on my own in the playground because just the noise of the other children and the physicality of them, and they like to play running around games, and I'm terribly coordinated. I can't catch balls or stuff like that. I felt more comfortable being on my own and making up imaginary friends at playtime. So if I was at school now, I would probably get an autism diagnosis age 5 if you'd just seen me in the school playground at that age. But at that time, in the late 70s, they just thought I was odd and a bit antisocial. And because I was doing fine academically, nobody suspected anything.
And you're a musician now, but did you find your musical passions like early in your childhood? And was that part of your childhood too?
Yeah, I started piano lessons at the age of 5. And I remember skipping around the playground on Wednesday nights. That was piano lesson night. And I was so happy to be going to my lessons. So it excited me from an early age. And my mum told me that the first chair I ever climbed onto was the piano chair at home when I was 2. I was desperate to start playing. But it wasn't until I was 11 that I really discovered my passion. The secondary school that I went to had a special music program that you could audition to get on. And I was very lucky I got onto that age 11, which meant I had a lot of extra music tuition throughout my secondary school. And had I not had that, I probably wouldn't be doing the job that I do now.
Oh, that's fantastic. So was it through the school, like extra lessons or activities that you had?
Yeah, I got piano and clarinet lessons. I was part of the choir. I was part of the wind band, musicianship lessons, and that there were 15 people in every year who got picked for this extra program. So it was quite a small number of us, really, but we got a lot of top class tuition. And so I was extremely lucky with that.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. And then you went to Cambridge University. Did you go there to study music as well?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And I also got an organ scholarship because by that time I'd started learning the church organ and playing for church services. And that meant I got to play for services in Cambridge at my college chapel and run the chapel choir and extra responsibilities like that. So that was pretty exciting.
That's awesome. So what was the college experience like? Was it different for you than like secondary school, or how was that like?
Yeah, it was very different. I was at Peterhouse, which is the smallest college in Cambridge, and it had only just started admitting women 5 years before I was there. So the women were vastly outnumbered by men, but it was nice that it was a small college, and I got on well doing the chapel choir. And then to do the actual music degree, we met with people from other colleges who were studying music, and yeah, it was good overall. But the school I went to before I went to Cambridge, it wasn't a private school or anything. It was very much a comprehensive school despite this extra music program. So when I got to Cambridge, there were a lot of privately educated people who were very upper class. And I wouldn't call myself upper class at all. And so I didn't really fit in with the whole class structure of it. And socially, it was really a bit of a disaster for me, to be fair.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know college is just so very different because, yeah, you've got a whole new group of people from all different backgrounds and it can be hard socially. Wow. Did you know at that point or even before that that you wanted to teach music, or did you want to perform, or both?
I definitely never wanted to perform. I just thought, oh, music's what I'm good at. I suppose that's what I'll carry on doing. But I didn't really have an idea at all. And then I thought I would be a classroom teacher, junior school. That was what I intended to do when I left Cambridge. So I did a PGCE, which is a year's course after you've graduated, to then go on and be a primary school teacher. But when I'd done that, I applied for probably about 60 jobs and went for several interviews, but I never once got past the interview stage. I think because of the way I present in interviews, I'm not very good at selling myself. And I was even worse at that time in my 20s, and they always picked someone else above me, even though I had a good CV and my tutors at college had written good things about me. But because of how I presented, they just never gave me a job. So after that, I had to have a plan B. And I thought, oh, what can I do now? I can play the piano, so I suppose I can teach it. And I just started putting out some adverts, and people sort of saw my card in post office windows. This was pre-internet days, and it just sort of blossomed from there. I've been doing it nearly 28 years now. I can't believe it.
Wow, that's amazing. And, you know, during the pandemic, you've been offering like a hybrid model of lessons. So some online, some in person. So what was it like kind of switching to that model? Like, and how has that worked out for you as a teacher?
Yeah, it was hard at first because I'd never done any online teaching before March 2020. And when we got locked down, I had to switch pretty quickly because people couldn't come to in-person lessons at that time. But I actually joined a professional group called the Curious Piano Teachers, which is a group of about 600 teachers with an online presence. But through that group, they taught me a lot about running online lessons. So I'm very, very fortunate that I found that group, which meant I could set up pretty quickly and get going online. And so during the full lockdowns, I taught completely online. But it wasn't easy at all, because as you can imagine, the sound of the piano, it sounds pretty tinny. And some people were doing it over their phones with terrible microphone quality. And so I could either see their hands or see their face, but not both. Sometimes I couldn't see either. So it was really quite difficult. Wow. But now I'm back teaching mostly face-to-face, but some people have opted to stay online for various reasons. And for some of them, it can work very well if they have a good setup.
Yeah, that's got to be challenging. I know a couple of people who did or tried to do music lessons or music groups online, and yeah, the technology makes it still challenging. Like I know you can't really be playing like at exactly the same time.
That's right. You can't do duets or anything, which is something I love to do in face-to-face lessons.
So yeah, it's quite an adjustment. It sounds like it's a lot easier or just more rewarding or just basically easier to teach in person?
Definitely, yeah.
I think I heard in another podcast interview that you teach some autistic students, as well as non-autistic students in your piano lessons.
Yeah.
So what's it like teaching autistic students?
I taught several autistic students before I even knew I was autistic myself. And I'll tell you the story of one student who I taught. He came to me aged 9. He'd already been to 3 other teachers and they'd all refused to teach him because of his style of learning. He learnt exclusively by ear. And at that point, he was almost non-verbal and the other teachers didn't feel able to teach him. But I said, oh, yes, I'll have a go. And he stayed with me for up to the age of about 21, and then he went on to music college to study music. If it hadn't been for the lessons he'd had with me, he might not have gone on to study music. And he's an incredible musician, plays everything by ear, an incredible memory, perfect pitch, which I don't have, by the way. I just have very good relative pitch. So I felt like it was him teaching me rather than the other way around. But I think the reason why he felt comfortable with me is because he probably picked up something that I didn't even know about myself at that time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's great that you were able to adapt to his learning style when so many other teachers couldn't or weren't willing to do that. Yeah. Do you have to just sort of adapt your teaching style to someone who learns by ear versus reading sheet music?
Yeah, well, what I did with him is I just played a few bars and he copied it and then remembered it forever. It was quite amazing.
Oh, that's really cool. Wow. So now that you know you're autistic, do you talk about that as part of your business or not really, or just?
Not really yet. I'm still quite nervous about talking about it because there's so much stigma around autism still. And I think some people wouldn't want to have an autistic teacher. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be willing to try it.
And it's challenging because so many people probably have had autistic teachers, especially people already growing up without a diagnosis. It's like, oh, you've actually worked with probably a lot of autistic people and had autistic teachers. It sounds like you're mostly coming back to in-person lessons and, you've been running your business for 20 something, almost 30 years. I guess, what's the biggest challenge that you have in running your business these days?
I guess communication, really, because I'm not a natural communicator. I have to communicate with all sorts of people. In the course of a day, I might have 15 different people, and from children age 6 up to older adults and beginners up to grade 8, all just in one day. So just swapping between them and having to give them all energy and listen to them. And it can be very tiring. Getting tired is probably one of my biggest challenges.
How many lessons do you usually do, like a day or a week?
Well, I work in 2 schools, and in the schools they have 20-minute lessons, which is very fast. It's sometimes in, out, in, out. Yeah. But my private lessons are half an hour long. So yeah, I can have up to 15 in a day.
Oh, yeah, that's exhausting.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's holidays this week. I don't know if you have half terms in America, but mid-semester, do you call it? I don't know if you have a week off in the middle of your term, but that's what we have here, and that's what this week is. So I'm glad about that. Oh, nice. No teaching this week.
Do you have to take breaks over the weekend, like a couple days to just kind of decompress?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I just have to chill out at the weekend. Yeah, very important. Recharge the batteries.
Definitely. Where's the most interesting place that you've ever played?
Well, I'll tell you about my favourite singer-songwriter, who's called Heather Peace, and I've actually supported her at one of her gigs down in Brighton. I'm part of her fan club, and one of the fan club weekends that we had, I'd just written a song for her baby daughter who'd just been born, and I said, would I be able to play it as part of this gig that Heather was doing? And she said, oh yes, would you like to be my support act and play 3 songs? So that's probably my favourite place I've ever played. That was quite amazing.
That's great. Yeah, just be able to play with musicians that you really admire and respect.
Yeah.
So cool. Not only are you a musician, you're also now involved in theater as well through the Spectrum Theater Company. So tell me about how you came to be involved with that group and what kind of work you do there.
Spectrum Theatre is a group in Sheffield for neurodivergent and other people. We're not all on the spectrum, but the majority of us are. And we actually rehearsed just at the end of my road, which is really handy.
Nice.
It's something I found out about just after my diagnosis. I was in a musical theatre company before that, but I never really fitted in with them because they were very neurotypical, and I always felt a bit strange. When I heard about this Spectrum Theatre, I thought, oh, I'll go along, see what that's like. And I've got very involved with them in the last 4 years. One of the signature show that we do is called In Someone Else's Shoes, and it's a show that's been written about our experiences on the autistic spectrum, and several of us in the group have had input into that, and we've performed that in several places, and it's also been filmed and is going to go out to schools to help schools learn more about autism.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, we do other things as well. Our director writes a lot of scripts for us, and he writes songs as well, him and this other guy. So we've done musicals. We did a version of A Christmas Carol by Dickens that was updated and set in Sheffield in the 21st century. And we did a musical about the miners' strike, which was in Yorkshire in the 1980s, and with Margaret Thatcher Prime Minister. That was quite funny to do. And yeah, we have a lot of fun. And it's a really good group of people to be involved with. And we're all ages from, I think our youngest is 17, 18, and then several people in their 60s and 70s as well. Not all autistic. Some of those are just friends of our director who's neurotypical. But we all get on brilliantly, and very pleased I found that group.
That's great. And how is your experience with that theater group different from, say, other theater groups that you've been a part of?
I just feel very comfortable there. I feel like I can be myself. I find that going into groups of autistic people, I don't feel weird or like an alien, even if they're not like me at all, some of the people. So there's a lot of younger males in our group who've had very different experiences to me, people who've been diagnosed in childhood and been to special schools, and quite different to me, but I feel very comfortable with them.
Yeah, that's really great. Are there differences in like the ways you rehearse or learn lines, or is it just giving space for each other and relating to each other in a different way?
Yeah, that sort of thing. And if somebody does get stressed during a rehearsal and needs to leave, for instance, there's no shame about that. If you need to stand outside the room and have some space and quiet, which some of us do at times, nobody says, oh, what's going on? And everybody just lets people get on with that sort of thing.
That's a great group, and really convenient that it rehearses at the end of your road.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely.
So when you first reached out to me, you had mentioned that you're actually very interested in the intersections between autism, sexuality, and gender. So I'm just curious, is that a topic that you've studied or researched or just started learning about? Because I'm curious to learn what you found out so far.
Well, just because I'm LGBT, and I also identify as non-binary, which is something that I started to read about after my autism diagnosis. The word non-binary has not been around for many years. It wasn't a concept that I thought about when I was younger. But then I thought, I don't really feel like a woman. I feel like somewhere between. I definitely don't feel like a man. I don't feel like I'm transgender. I don't want to change any elements of my body, but I don't feel like a woman, although I'm comfortable in my woman's body, if that makes sense. So I thought, oh, non-binary fits really well. And I started to read that a lot of autistic female-born people feel like we are non-binary. And my wife also identifies that way. So there's two of us in the house, which is very handy. There's a big link between autism and gender and sexuality. Something else I've done is I've been to a conference called Autscape. I don't know if you've heard about that. No. It's an annual conference of about 200 people. I've been 3 times face to face, and then the last couple of years we've had them online. And so this conference is just for any autistic people to get together, and we have workshops and speakers, and the whole thing is run by autistic people. So there's no neurotypical involvement at all. So it's a really special environment. And going there, we had an LGBT group there, and just about half the participants of the conference attended the LGBT group. So that just shows you the kind of crossover there is, the kind of intersections that many of us identify as something other than straight.
Mhm. Yeah, I've heard that as well from the readings that I've done, that there is a large percentage of the autistic population who are part of the LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
community. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And that's great that there's a conference. Is it a small conference?
Well, it's about 200 people, but I think the last couple of years when we've had it online, there've been more like 400 because people can obviously join from anywhere in the world when it's online. But
Mhm.
hopefully this year it's going back to being in person again.
Okay.
And I hope it doesn't get too much bigger because it's better having it small. But it is a wonderful environment and that was great for me when I first got diagnosed as well, meeting autistic people there.
That's great that you're able to meet like a lot of autistic people like in real life. Cause I know for me getting
Yeah.
diagnosed during the pandemic, I mean, fortunately I have a podcast, so I get to talk one-on-one with a lot of autistic people, but yeah, I can't say I've
Yeah.
ever really been in a room with a lot of autistic people. I think it'd be really
No.
cool to do someday. What are your goals going forward for your business? Do you want to like grow and expand it? Or are you just kind of happy with the size and the number of students that you have now, or anything new you want to do with it?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it is now, but I would like to teach more neurodivergent students definitely going forward. And I've got a chapter in a book coming out in April. This is something very exciting. It's called Learning from Autistic Teachers, How to Be a Neurodivergent Friendly School. And each chapter in it is written by different people who work in schools who are all autistic ourselves. And it's going to be published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. It's a pretty big book. Is going to be quite groundbreaking, I think, because a lot of people think that autistic people can't be any kind of teacher because maybe we lack empathy or something, which, as you know, is absolutely rubbish.
Right.
And so a book written by us it's going to be really groundbreaking. And so I'm really excited about this coming out in April.
That's awesome. Yeah, probably by the time this interview airs, that book might even be out. So I'll get a link to the book and I'll make sure it's in the
Yeah,
show notes so
cool.
people can read it. That's really exciting. So is it all kinds of teachers, obviously not just of music, but all topics?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the other chapters yet. I'm very much looking forward to reading it. My chapter is called Life on the Margins, a Peripatetic Perspective. A peripatetic means a teacher that visits different schools like I do with my music.
That's awesome. How did you find out about that opportunity to contribute the chapter to the book?
Oh, that was through Twitter as well. It's amazing what you can find out through social media.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that and seeing that when that comes out. So cool.
Yeah.
Madge, thank you so much for talking with me today. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website for my music lessons, which is mwoollard.webs.com, or you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Funky Piano. That's funk, IE, and then piano. Or you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm on those as well.
Right, fantastic. Yeah, I'll put links to those in the show notes as well. Awesome. Well, Madge, thank you so much for telling me about your experiences as a musician and as an autistic music teacher, and just all the things that you've learned and the community that you have with other autistic people.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. I think it's really important doing these sorts of podcasts and for people to watch them and find out that there is a bigger community out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks again for being on my show today.